In this video, guys, I've got no time to waste. I've got to peel the rubber off the rims, straighten that rear rim, get it all cleaned up, get new rubber back on it, change the wheel bearings, then I've also got to rebuild these calipers and try and get it all back on this bike. Let's see how far we get. When it comes to rebuilding calipers, it's really simple. You just buy the simple rebuild kit for your bike, front or rear caliper, and they're cheap, you know, 15, 20 bucks, I'm not even sure, but it doesn't matter. When you're doing a rebuild on a caliper, you gotta have the kit. There's no sense buying one seal when the kit's so affordable. So anyway, the first thing to really look at is after you've cleaned it all up, make sure there's no dirt down inside. Make sure that you've chased all your threads prior so everything goes together smooth. So we're gonna quickly chase the threads with just a tap or a thread chaser if you have one. And then we're gonna blow it out with some compressed air, making sure we get all the grime out from us sandblasting. We don't want any sand in there. So I'm just scraping in here because even though I sandblasted it and it's super clean, there's still gonna be gunk in where the seal needs to go. So I'm just using just a single pick or an awl. If your dad's got an awl, don't let him see you stealing it and wrecking it, doing it this way, but hey, they work pretty good. But if you got a pick, get in there with a pick, get that gunk and grime out of where your seals need to go. There's two little recesses on this rear, so we're gonna dig into it and get it cleaned up. Just take your compressed air, guys, and then blow it out real good. Now, if you got sand and stuff in there, put some safety glasses on. It's not worth getting a piece at 100 miles an hour into your eye. You guys know I'm a big supporter of grease. Like, I like using lots of grease on my seals, if you've been watching, following along. One thing you can't use grease on is the inside of this caliper. These seals, do not put grease on them. The bigger seal here, we're gonna dip our finger in some brake fluid, and this is just our normal .4 brake fluid that we would use in the bike. Whatever .4 you got. The bike needs .4, don't use .3. And we're just gonna put that seal in. Obviously it looks really big, but the seal is really manipulable. You're easily able to get it in there. And I just kind of course, trying to show it on camera. I just kind of pop it in. And you don't want to twist it. You just want to put it in the groove. Run your finger around and get it down in there. If it's twisted, that's no good. You gotta have it good and flat. Ours is twisted, of course. Don't rip your seal doing what I'm doing. There we go. And I just want to wipe brake fluid in there on that seal, lubing it up. We'll put our front one in. Same thing, goes in the front groove. It's a lot smaller of a seal on this caliper. Your caliper might be different. But a lot of guys have done brakes before, changed their pads, no problem. But they probably haven't rebuilt the whole caliper. So, trying to get that in there. Again, you don't want to curl it. And the front seal on this bike has a little double groove to like catch. So don't rip it. That's the key. Just getting it in. Perfect, just like that. Dab some more brake fluid. Get the seal good and lubed up. Then we have to put in the piston. The piston goes in with the hollow side out. The hollow side pushes against your brake pad, and this side, the fluid pushes up against. So I'm sure you can imagine if it was like that, it would have to fill the whole void with fluid in order to get it to move. You'd be bleeding your brakes for months. But this way, you save yourself a lot of brake fluid. It doesn't need to be bled for months. And it just, you gotta push it in. So I'm gonna start it by hand, just getting it going. Then I'm gonna use a little clamp. And if I can get it in far enough, we'll use an old brake pad to help push it back in. All right, so we got a big washer we're gonna stick on there. Then we're gonna use our little C-clamp vise. Open her up. Get it on top of the washer and on the back of the flat of the piston there that we're gonna push in. And we're just gonna clamp it down. Start pushing it in, and it'll start going. And we're gonna reposition our clamp a little better. Hopefully you guys can see. If it's binding up, push it in a different spot because you're not straight. Because once they go really smooth. There we go. Push it all the way in, just like that. Now we'll get the rest of the parts cleaned up and reinstalled. So I've just had the parts soak in some simple green to help me break down the grime and the grease that's on them. But I'll go ahead and wire brush the threads and just using a Scotch-Brite pad and some simple green that's pretty cruddy looking because of the grime that's on all the parts from never being cleaned properly or taken care of. I don't think this caliper's ever been apart. So whether it's your front or rear, the hanger that holds it will have spots where you have to put your parts back in. We're going to go ahead and snug all them back in where they need to go. And we're going to reinstall the brand new seal rubbers. It's going to go up into here. Now this is a place I do like to use grease. So we'll get our normal good old waterproof grease out. And we're going to take a finger full of it. And I'm going to jam a bunch down in that hole. And it's going to make a mess, but that's one spot I like to use some grease. And then I take the rubber, and hopefully we can hold on to it, and we shove it into the hole properly, just like that. And now there's lots of grease in there, so when this from the other part goes in, it's not just running in there dry. The caliper itself has a spot where it needs a slide as well. So there's another slide. And I like to put some grease on the inside of it, but I also like to put a little bit on the outside so it helps me get it through the hole. Because you got to jam this thing through the hole. Now you don't jam the fat end, you jam the open end. But I like to jam some grease down in there. Put it on this shaft here too. You can push it on. It'll help put the grease in. A little bit of grease around it. And which way does it go? This way? I think it goes this way. It's been a while. Nothing's worse than when you go to change your brakes and you've ripped one of your boots. So even though you might not be, if you plan on keeping a bike, it's good to keep a rebuild kit on hand. They're cheap, like I said, it's kind of a stocked part. We'll jam the clip in. The clip goes in like that to clear the pin. I think you guys can see okay, yeah. And then this pin will come across with the new brake pads to help hold it. All right, so we've got everything reinstalled back in the caliper. We've torqued down the slide. We've got lots of grease inside each one of the slide housings. So basically, it's time to kind of put our caliper back together. So we take our caliper and take our slide, and there's only one way they can fit. You want to push them and get these to seat and lock onto the slide pin. Then, since you have your clip in, the front clip and the rear clip, you just put your pads in. Obviously I like to put the inside pad first, then the outside pad. The little clip actually has a lock in the middle, like a little tab, so it won't allow the pads to slide past, so you have to put them in. Oh, I'm putting this in the wrong way. Jesus, what am I doing? This goes in from this side. Get your pads lined up in this little pin. You tighten it down. Thread it all the way through. What's left in our rebuild kit is a little bleeder cover. We'll put it on so we don't lose it, even though we're going to have to bleed the brakes obviously when we fill them. And then 2 new washers for the banjo bolt. So the banjo bolt, I'm sure you guys would know from taking it apart, but one washer goes on top, then you have the part that sends the fluid, and the other washer goes on the bottom. We're gonna shove both on right away now and just thread the banjo bolt in by hand so we can install it and then deal with putting the line on. Got her as far as we can by hand. It's just catching a bit. We're just gonna, it's a 12 mil. Now we can just take and simply slide it in the rail that holds it built to the swing arm here. And it's just waiting for the rim and axle. I'm a huge fan of a blind bearing puller kit to pull wheel bearings. It just works really, really well. So you take your blind bearing puller, you basically install it, and then start tightening it up. Then it tightens to the inside of the bearing. You install the slide hammer, and hopefully the last guy put enough grease on it that it'll come popping out. Sometimes it don't. There we go. There we go. All right, so now that we've got the wheel bearings out, the front tire will fit on the stand. First thing we're gonna do is pull the valve stem, the core, so that we can let the air out of the tire. Oh, it's full of goop. Somebody gooped this tire. They had a hole in it. Of course they did. And we'll pull off the nut. So that the valve stem can move freely so we can get the old tube out along with this tire. We'll come around and loosen the wheel lock, the rim lock. We don't want to take it all the way out, we just want to get it to the edge. So if you guys can see, I've just taken it all the way to the edge, and then I use my wrench and push it in just to get it up out of the way. It might be springy on your bike, it might not be seized up like this one. And then I'm going to try and see what I can do with the bead here. Sometimes you can get lucky and just push it off by hand like I'm doing there. But sometimes you have to pry it off with your spoons. What I'll also do is I just use Windex and I'll lube up the bead to help me pull it off. When we install it, we've switched from using Windex to an actual tire paste, and it's a night and day difference actually. I didn't think it would be, but it is. Buy yourself some tire paste when you're doing installs. And these are the Motion Pro spoons, guys. These are the ones I like to use. I find it makes the job a lot easier. I don't damage the rims or the tires, putting them on. Flip it over and then pry it off the other way. I want to get this tire letting us push it off of I'm going to do the tube and all, because I don't want this tube. If you're planning on saving your tube, you would want to pull it out. Or you can push it off, whatever you want. But I just shove my tool in there like that, get under, and then just pry it off. And then I start pushing by hand. Sometimes you need two. Smaller tire you will. All right, we'll just get her in there, push it. And just keep pushing, and you can push the tire right off the rim. Take our spoons out, just like that. Tire's off. If you've seen my other videos, I really don't like doing tires. They're a pain in the butt. And an 18-inch tire is just that much worse than a 19-inch tire. So these 93s, they had 18s. So we get to fight with this one. I'm not gonna make you guys watch the whole fight. We've got this apron now though. We got an apron, kind of cool, dirt bike repair apron. We'll see. Hopefully it keeps my shirts clean because I wreck a lot of shirts. Anyway, we're gonna blacksmith this rear rim because it's got one hell of a dent in it. So we're gonna try and work it back just by working the metal. We're not gonna try and use heat if we don't have to, but we're gonna try and get this to bend down. I haven't loosened the spokes or anything. I'm just gonna try and work it back to where it should be. And I'm using a piece of a railway beam, like the track, to try and help hold it with some more force. We'll see how far we get here, see if we can get anything to happen. Guys, as we were beating the hell out of this rim, trying to get it straight, we noticed here, let me zoom in for you, right here, there's a crack. I didn't see it on the bike because the rim is so scratched up. It's 93, it's Project 93, Canada's worst dirt bike. It's definitely Canada's worst dirt bike. Not one part has been good so far. So in Project 93 fashion, we need to get a new 18-inch rim. We have one, a good used rim, but we don't have any spokes. And these spokes are, I don't know if they're gonna come out okay. We'll see. We've ordered spokes, so we're gonna have to wait on the rear until the spokes come in. Since we're gonna be waiting on the rear, we might as well focus on the front. We'll get our rubber off, our spoke protecting rubber, and we're gonna get this rim cleaned up really good, get the hub cleaned up, and hopefully get a tire mounted on it here pretty quickly. So we've moved to the backyard because we're gonna wire wheel all the crud off this old rim. And doing it in the shop really gets the wire shavings everywhere. If you don't have a rubber band, or you can't get one, or you need to get your tire done, or whatever, I use Gorilla Tape, duct tape. Some guys use. Some guys complain that it's hard to get off, but I've never had a problem. I switch it when I change my tires if that's what I've used. I do like the rubber bands. They just seem hard for me to get. I don't know why. They can't ship over the States or something. I'm not even sure, because every time I try and order them, there's like a chemical warning, and maybe something that they use to make them. They can't ship it to Canada. Maybe you have to have a special like dealer's number or something. I don't know. Anyway, I have a hell of a time trying to get them. So we use tape. I'm sure you can get them. I just don't know where to get them. Next step, guys, lots of baby powder in the tube. Just cheap, no-name baby powder. Then we just swirl it around, get it all over inside the tube to help lubricate the rim, or all inside the tire to help lubricate the tube. Then we install the rim lock back onto the tire, and we just want a few threads, just enough that it's not gonna fall out on us. That way we've got lots to play with. We're gonna take our tire, throw it up top. We're gonna look for a direction on the tire. Sometimes tires are directional. I know these ones aren't, because we're using a Dunlop 952 tire. It's basically an upgrade from the 752, which was an awesome tire in the year, like 93. When it comes to your tire, it's gonna have a mark, and that yellow mark is where you want to put the valve stem. That's what that mark's for. And I put a little bit of air in the tube, so it can go into the tire. Sometimes it goes in a little easier if it's got some air. It holds shape. All right, guys, so the next step's going to be installing the new bearings. We've placed our bearings in the freezer overnight. They're plenty good and cold. What we're going to do is take some of our handy dandy waterproof grease, get a bunch down in there, around there, but we also want to get some down in a little deeper to help hold up the shaft once the shaft goes in. It's going to push a lot of it out, but it's okay. We'll go ahead and put some on the bearing. The bearing's the same size on both sides. The next step, probably should have done this first, but we need to get our driver. I have a seal driver kit, and it's all in millimeters, so you just kind of course, my hand's greasy now. That's the one. Just like that. We can place that on there. Then we can drive the bearing in. Once you press this seal in, it will make a seal against the metal, just like that. So now, the most important step, when we flip this over, first thing we're going to do, put more grease in the hole. And then there's the spacer has got to go in, just like that. There's no other way to get grease around that spacer bar. So before we can throw our front tire on, you have to mount your fork guards. And we've got these UFO ones. They're the nuclear red. They look really good. UFO does a good job with their plastics, guys, among other things. They have a whole bunch of products, and we're going to be using a bunch of them on this bike. But if you're looking for fork guards that are the red, that are the bright, like red, the 90s red, they have your fork guards. Anyway, we're going to get those on because you can't get at the one bolt with the tire on. It's impossible. So now we'll simply install the front tire. We're gonna slide it into between the forks and just basically lift up. We've got our axle here. We're gonna put some grease on it and get it ready to go through the brand new bearings and everything. Now there's lots of grease in there, but we'll put a little bit more on just to make sure. So these axle pinch bolts are only like 14 pounds. So we're gonna snug them up for right now. Then we're gonna tighten our axle, torque it to 64 foot-pounds, and then we'll come back and check our pinch bolts. When you're doing your pinch bolts, guys, do both sides, and come back and do them again. So now that we've got the front tire on, we're gonna adjust our front tube height. And I like to run about 5 mil off of the top of the tube. And I use my verniers to measure down to the triple clamp. And that's a good place to start. So right now we're sitting at almost 8 mil. So I'm gonna shove these down. And by shoving the suspension down in the triple clamp, it rakes the bike out, makes it longer. It's a little harder to turn minutely, but it makes it more stable at high speeds. If you find that the bike isn't turning, you go up in the triple clamp. So you can come up, 7 and 8's not a bad number, but we want it to be equal on both sides. and that's up to you, what you like. We're about 8 on both sides. So we're gonna come up a little bit and go from there. 5.1. I think we're good on that side. So then we'll go ahead and snug this side up, then adjust this side. We're also looking at, to make sure the forks are in the right rotation. I want them nice and straight so I can get at that air bleeder screw. So before we go ahead and torque these down, we have them snugged up. But we need to still torque out our steering stem from doing our steering stem bearings. If you guys seen that, I mentioned I didn't torque it and I was gonna torque it. But now that I have everything adjusted properly, I'm gonna torque it. And this is a ridiculous amount of torque. It's because of what you're trying to do here. I don't have any handlebars to hold it. I got no back tire, but I have to hit 110 foot-pounds on this for a 93. 92 is different, but it says from 93 on in the book, it's 110 foot-pounds. So we got our torque wrench, that's like a tire on a car. We got it adjusted and we're gonna pull on it. Right there. There we go. Perfect. So this is a pretty important part, guys, torquing out the suspension pinch bolts. And I have my wrench set at 18 foot-pounds. The problem is you don't just want to torque this one down to 18 and then this one down to 18 and keep going. You have to constantly go back and forth to get it to be accurate, because otherwise, let me jump over here, you're just going to tighten one and loosen the other. So it's kind of a game you have to play. But don't rush this part. It's the whole thing that holds your front tire on the bike, basically. Without it, you're gonna run into some problems. And I'm just doing like little quarter turns or half turns to each bolt until there's a click. There's a click. Another one. See, they're out torquing each other, so there's a good solid click. That one's good. We'll do the same to the bottom. Every time we get a chance to work on Project 93, it starts to look more and more like an actual dirt bike. Now, Project 93 has its hardships every time as well. In this case, it was the rear rim. We tried to straighten it, and then we noticed the cracks. And at that point, you just have to cut your losses. I don't stock 18-inch spokes. I stock some 19s and some 21s, obviously, for normal rear and front tires. But the 18s are kind of a thing of the past. Sorta. Some of the new trail bikes are still running 18s. But I don't run into them a lot. So we're waiting on spokes. Once they get here, we'll re-spoke that rear hub into a good used rim. And we'll show you guys how that's done. But anyway, guys, like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if there's anything you guys noticed that I didn't do, or you guys have little tricks that you guys do. I love hearing the comments, and I really like when people are getting involved, and I think we're all learning. I'm learning stuff from you guys, and it's great. Sometimes the simple things that I'm doing one way, I think is the way to do it, and somebody mentions something, and it's like, that's a really good idea, and I'm gonna try it. Like, I think they're great ideas. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.